Hello, South Africa, and welcome back to Coronacast, your twice-weekly information show keeping you up to speed with the latest information relating to the coronavirus and its impact on South Africa. Well, we've got an action-packed show today, and I'm very, very excited to announce a really good lineup. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about the decision made yesterday by government to extend the Disaster Management Act reach over South Africa until July. Obviously, the Disaster Management Act and the declaration of disaster was necessary in the beginning. But unfortunately, we've watched our government has abused the powers given to it by the Disaster Management Act over the course of the last few weeks, leading to draconian regulations being established and the destruction of the lives and livelihoods of many, many South Africans through petty, authoritarian regulations that have had absolutely nothing to do with the combating the virus and everything to do with personal crusades and flights of fancies of a variety of these ministers. And this has obviously impacted on South Africa's economy, but also on the ability of families across the country to be able to provide themselves and to be able to feed, clothe, and ensure that there is a sustainability of life for their particular families. And we're going to be discussing a little bit of the impact of the COVID-19 crisis today on a variety of industries. We want to talk a little bit about the livelihoods. The last few focuses have been on health, and so we want to talk a little bit about the livelihoods that have been affected by the COVID virus. And for those of you who have got a little bit tired of seeing my mug on the show over the course of the last few weeks, I'm joined in studio today by some real television stars, and I'm very, very happy to have with us Sandra Prinsloo, who is a doyen of South African theatre and the stage and of film. Sandra has a very, very proud record of fighting for against racism and the policies of the apartheid regime, and is very well known for being the first actress to indulge in an interracial kiss all the way back in 1985. It must have sent absolute shivers up the spines of those nationalist dictators of the time, and certainly a very brave move. I can imagine P.W. Botha must have had his hat blow off when he found out about that. But these were brave times, and I think we often forget just how authoritarian and dictatorial things were then, and how difficult it was to stand up, and that there were consequences for those who stood up against the apartheid regime. And then, for all of you watchers of the silver screen, I'm sure Armand Aucamp is no stranger to you. He's a South African heartthrob, and he's been on a number of productions, including Ballade for an Enkeling, Die Book Club, and he's also got a great range of and great series on how to eat healthy and to use the keto diet. And I'm sure he'll be able to give me a few tips. I'm sure you've noticed the lockdown exercise regime has not been kind to me, and I hope I'm going to be able to pick up some good tips from Armand on some healthy dieting going forward. And joining us with Armand and Sandra will be our Western Cape Minister of Arts and Culture and Sports and Recreation, Anroux Marais, who's not only a member of our party and a member of the government, but also a very good friend of mine, and often I've referred to as my favourite minister in the Western Cape government, but don't tell anybody, Anroux. But they'll be joining. And then a bit later in the show, for the second segment, we'll be focusing on tourism and the effect of the lockdown on guest houses, bed and breakfast establishments, and the tourism industry. And for that segment, we're going to be joined by Manny De Freitas, who's our National Shadow Minister of Tourism, and he's going to be unpacking our submission that we've made to government. And we'll be joined by Kelly Sivright, who's the owner of the Glengarry self-catering accommodation establishment in the Natal Midlands. And we can't wait to have a chat to her all the way from KwaZulu-Natal, who's going to be sharing with us the experiences that they've had over the course of the COVID-19 crisis, as well as the impact that it's had on the business, but also the faces behind the business, the story behind the business, and the families who rely on that business to be able to sustain themselves. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome you all to the show. Anroux and Sandra and Armand, what a great privilege to have you all. Welcome to Coronacast.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
Really, I'm feeling a bit starstruck today, so forgive me if I'm a bit slow.
You're doing really well.
A bit slower on the uptake, and I'm sure that people are going to be very happy to see some real stars of the stage and screen with us today. And Anroux, welcome to us. It's great to have you with us. So Sandra, let's start with you. You mentioned, and you've been giving a number of interviews around the struggle that the arts are going through at this particular time, and the tremendous pressure that the lockdown has put, particularly on the performing arts industry. And a number of the artists have received almost no financial relief during this time. And do you want to talk a little bit about this, about what the challenges have been?
Sure. It's been an enormous challenge, because basically everything is just shut down. You know, there's just so little that one can do. Everyone is trying to put things on internet platforms, trying to be resourceful, trying to be creative and all that. And that's fine, but, you know, this is all stuff that takes a lot of planning, changing things around. Theatres have been closed down. Festivals have been cancelled. Actors, technicians, directors have not had an income for months now. And then there was this 150 million, I think it was, relief assigned to the arts. And very few people have actually received anything. And what they've received is also not very much. I mean, I actually have a list. And I'm not saying that all the money has not been allocated, but where are the lists? How do we find out? Because all the appeals that have been made through, for instance, the Actors Benevolent Fund, through SAGA, who communicate with government all the time, and they just want to know, where is the money? Because I received absolutely nothing 60 days on. 2 days ago, suddenly out of the blue, they said, oh, but it's for the production company. So once you start splitting up whatever was given, the 20,000 rand as it is, for a production company, and the producers take their cut, the actors have to be paid, the technicians have, there's nothing left. I mean, it's really, it's pitiful. And one doesn't want to be ungrateful for this, and I'm very happy for the people that did get, but there are many who didn't get anything. I'm not saying they're not going to get it, maybe they are, but can we please be part of the process? There's just no communication. If we could just get some communication from government as to where the money is going. Have they given anything to sport? Because, you know, we fall under the same department as sports, which is ridiculous, but still, we don't know. We have absolutely no idea, but I do know that most of the people who were supposed to perform at the Car in Car, which was cancelled literally 2 weeks before going there, have not received anything.
So let's talk about these festivals, Sandra. I mean, how important are they for the arts industry, and how important are they for the local economies of the towns where they take place?
They're extremely important. You know, you've hit the nail on the head when you talk about the communities and the wider community. There's something like 400 festivals. And not all of them are proper arts festivals, but they always have a component of entertainment in any event. But the big festivals are our bread and butter, because once again, the arts is not being supported by government, except for a few theatres in the country. There's no interaction, there's no plan, there's no support, and because there's no support, there's no sustainability. And the festivals have given some sense of sustainability. So we literally are like gypsies again, you know, moving from festival to festival to festival. But at least they were there. Now that they've been shut down, and whether they can withstand this tremendous economic blow, I don't know. I don't know. Will they be coming back? Will they make it? And everybody is sitting without work. It's not just actors. It's an enormous infrastructure of people.
Stage, the crews,
everybody,
the sound technicians,
it's
the lighting
huge.
people, everything.
Yes, it's
Armand, you're a young actor and certainly a household name in South Africa. How's the lockdown affected you and your ability to earn a living?
Everything just came to a grinding halt. So, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat, as in there's nothing unless you, like you said, create something on an online platform. But for that, you need support. So you need to have an already established platform, because
and they're expensive.
And they're expensive. And also now you're in lockdown. If you need equipment, where do you get that? You can't get that. So it's been very tough. What I think is important is that, as Sandra said, we're not being supported by government, but I think the pandemic, the lockdown has cast a spotlight as to how broken it really is. It's as if we've always kind of been on the back foot going into this, and that for me is the problem. I was so with this. Yes, we've got to slow the spread of the virus. Yes, all these measures being put in place, as we all were. But now, what now? Are we going to fix this broken thing that's come generations before?
Yeah, that's the
So let's just talk about this, because
I
the
agree.
arts in South Africa were already very poorly funded. There's very little. If you compare what governments and other countries spend on the arts,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
let's just talk about why arts are so important. That, you know, John Kennedy is one of my favorite role models, and
Yes.
he always made the point that there was a very strong link between the advancement of a society and its ability to be able to promote the arts.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that, because, you know, it plays an enormously important social role. It is a mirror to your society. It is a vehicle where criticism, but on a wider philosophical scale, it doesn't have to be petty sort of criticism. You know, it's actually where people go to have their minds expanded, with their emotions expanded, their whole being as a living human being expanded through interacting, especially in live theatre. I think, you know, you can't replace that with online performances.
Absolutely.
It's nice to see the stuff that the National Theatre has been doing, that, but it's not the same as sitting in an auditorium where you're actually experiencing that live energy, that flow of energy and ideas, and where you're being challenged every second as the audience, you know. So I think it is enormously important. It really speaks to our souls. I mean, you're not a nation without a soul.
And let's
you
just
know.
talk about the importance of arts as well in terms of holding governments accountable. And I think of the work
Absolutely.
that people like you and Peter Dirk Ace and others did in what were really difficult times in the 1980s.
Oh, absolutely.
And the use of theatre as a social commentary to cast a light on the injustices that were going on.
Because often, you know, so often people don't question things. You accept things. It's very easy to brainwash people. You know that. I mean, you know, the rule of three. So theatre, this is what theatre does. And film as well. Film does that as well. It questions things. It forces people to sit up and take note of things that they might just never have bothered about, you know. Because you watch the news, it's not the same as when you're watching a play and you're really being forced to think. But you know, I just also want to say it's a huge community. It's a very large community. If you look at entertainment as a whole in South Africa, and you know, with that I mean everything that's included under entertainment, even circuses, whatever, you know. There are about 6.5 million people working in that industry, and they've all just come to a grinding halt. It's not, I don't know, it's not sustainable. And I agree with Armand that the cracks are showing so badly now because there never was support, there never was dialogue. We have never had a minister in the government, in the present government, that I know of, that even goes to a theatre, that knows what's going on. Thank you for Anroux Marais.
Yes, well,
who's
we're
a
going to
brilliant
speak to
minister.
Anroux now.
Yeah,
Anroux,
no, there she is. She's
this
brilliant.
is a good opportunity to bring you in here,
She's
Anroux.
brilliant.
So you're the Western Cape Minister, Provincial Minister for Arts, Culture, Sports and Recreation. What has your department been doing as a provincial government department to support the arts here in the Western Cape? And why do you see the arts as such an important element of our society?
Thank you, John. And I want to greet Sandra and Armand. You know, Sandra and I come a long way. And as we've heard, you know, it was just Afrikaans, altyd tot stilstand geknars. You weet, one moment we were preparing for Cape Epic and looking forward to visit KAKNK, and just everything went down. And it had a devastating effect on our artists. And it was, as you've known, that Nathi Matetwa allocated 150 million. And then, just for a record, I've seen the list, and it's only people or artists with a national footprint that did get some funding. I think about 5 people from the Western Cape did get some funding. And it was important for us in the Western Cape to make efforts in support of the creative economy. given the significant impact that it has on the economy of the province, as well as its significance in building a socially inclusive society. And we put together a relief fund, and it supports specifically, and it's not only art, it's also for the lightning people, the venues, the organizations. It is a lengthy document, and some people, they were very not happy with it. And I said to them, just read through everything and submit your request. And we've called for the request, went out on the 6th of May, and it closed on the 19th of May, and we had 1,332 requests for artists and 108 for sport. Now, the sport fraternity is more regulated, and the artists are more creative. So it started yesterday with the criteria to see who can benefit from it. And I said to the department, we must try and help each and every one. So that is what we've done. And I can send, if you want more info of what, it's for everyone. It's for everyone. Everyone could ask, artists, as I've said, organizations, freelance people, not only your professional artists could apply for the funding.
And Anroux, if a corporate wants to donate to this fund, how would they go about doing it? Is it possible if there's someone watching Coronacast and they think that this is a worthwhile cause to donate to, how do they do so?
They can contact me, and I will go to our DG, our Director General. The government's got all red tape, but it's possible, and we do have partnerships with private organizations, even from overseas, so it's possible, and it will be fantastic. And what I want to say is that I think this time also made us aware of everyone, how important arts is for us. Everyone, you cannot survive without any entertainment or with arts or poetry. It's just, I think in hindsight, it's also a good time for the artists, even though it's a very bad time for the artists.
Armand, what were you busy working on when Coronacast hit? And have you applied to the national government for the funding?
Can I just say, I met Minister Marais last year, I don't know if she remembers, at a very small community theatre fundraiser in Paarl. And I think that speaks volumes as to...
Absolutely. She's always there. Yeah.
So yes, I was signed on to do a film, which we would have been already wrapped. We started shooting in May, and I applied to the national government for funding. I'm very meticulous, so there is not a document or a letter out of place. I am very meticulous with forms. I enjoy the census form a lot to fill that out. Didn't hear anything. I'm on quite a lot of groups where people communicate. No one's heard a single thing. And then the Western Cape department also put out a call for applications, which are also
and we're very thankful for that.
Did you get something from the Western Cape government?
We don't know yet. We're waiting for you guys.
Ellipsis.
Keeping fingers crossed.
Yeah. It's
from your lips to the ears of the
minister. Literally. And what I also want to say is, yes, like Minister said, it's a very tough time for the arts, but also a great time for the arts in terms of art's being consumed, books are being read, music's being listened to again, films are being watched. It's just sad for me that the majority are international foreign imports.
Yes, absolutely.
If things were better in place, if we had supported the arts, the writers, the directors, the actors, everyone involved, we would be exponentially consuming local content.
Yes.
And we're not. Netflix is, and I understand, but the ratio would have been different if the role players supported us better.
Absolutely.
Not from last year, the past 20 years.
back.
So Sandra, let's just talk about some of these community theatres. Now, you say in Kalk Bay, and you told me that the theatre there has had to shut down.
The Kalk Bay Theatre, yes, we got a very sad email the other day.
The lights are down, the curtains closed.
Just saying they can't afford the rent. It's simple. It's a sad fact that in this country, artists really live from hand to mouth. And if anything goes wrong, if anything happens like the pandemic that we have now, it just becomes not, unsustainable. People can't pay the rent. I've heard of so many people that have just had to give up their apartments. That have, I don't know how people are going to survive. It's really, really sad. I know that the Theatre Benevolent Fund is handing out food parcels to quite a lot of actors. I mean, that's how bad it is. It's really bad, but people really cannot, So help is needed. And you see, I always say this, that it's not that I want to protect the old arts councils that we had. We had the provincial arts councils, because there was a lot wrong. I mean, it was very top-heavy with bureaucracy. There was a lot wrong with a lot of people who were excluded from it. The whole community was excluded from it. But, yet in those days we did have pension funds. We had medical schemes, and we even got housing funds.
Sure.
Wow.
So if there was a crisis, you were okay. You were okay, So, and that all went out the window. And if I look especially at young artists now and how they struggle to make ends meet, how they live, I just don't think it's fair. I honestly don't think so. It is also the wider entertainment industry. It was analysed by a British economist that we contribute 14% to the GDP, which is massive.
It is huge.
It's very big. It's very big. That's including everything. I mean, casinos and whatever. But even so, it's not negligible.
It's a tragedy, because the truth of the reality is, and it's what we've experienced over the course of the last decade. Once the footlights go off in a theatre, it's very seldom going to resuscitate itself.
Yes, absolutely.
And lose those platforms. But also what you don't want is artists being forced to go and do other things, Armand, that, and then, just to put food on the table, and they're lost to the arts forever.
Absolutely.
And that is really got to be one of the... So what are some of the things that artists are doing at this time to make ends meet? What innovations are you aware of any innovations that are taking place?
He's been quite innovative, but I'll also tell you about one or two things.
So it's been a time of invention, creation, which has been rewarding as well. Trying to make ends meet. Ideas pop up, and you've got to implement them. So I've started relatively early on. I started holding workshops, online workshops for young actors. Self-tapes have become, even before the lockdown, self-tapes where you don't even go in for an audition. You've got to tape yourself at home. And as easy as that sounds, it's actually quite difficult, because there's a lot of technicalities. So I'm guiding actors through that. I
have a 3-year-old at home, so that would be out the window completely.
That's tricky.
And then some voiceovers, so those things are starting to happen more remotely. And I've recently filmed a thing with my mom in her house, me in my house, a concert where we will be reading children's stories next to a fireplace in Afrikaans, like Afrikaanse kinderstories. So,
Dis wonderlik. En hoe kry mense hierdie moet mense betaal vir hierdie of hoe werk dit?
Ja, so
waar kan hulle dit sien?
Ja, dit sal, I don't know if we're allowed to say platform names.
Yes, of course you
can.
Okay.
So kaartjies sal op Computer beskikbaar wees later in die maand, en jy koop 'n skakel, en die skakel is geldig vir 10 dae dink ek. En jy probeer dit so goedkoop as moontlik hou, R50. En jy weet dit is een kaartjie wat 'n hele gesin kan kyk. So 5, 6, 7 people in a household can watch one device. So it really does R10 a person.
I saw Alexander had to innovate around his movie launch. I mean, that new movie that came out.
Oh yes. What is it?
The one about the guy troopy at the border and sort of coming out and that sort of thing.
Well, Murphy. All about Armand.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, he had to
completely
sell, sell
stadmoorde.
Yeah.
Griekwa started now.
The premiere happened.
So, do we have any indication when things will get back to...
Can I also quickly add to that?
Sure, absolutely.
What's wonderful is some of the theatres, and 3 that I know of, is the Die Boer in Durbanville, and Karen Zoid and Karin, who have a studio out at what's the place called?
Philadelphia,
Yeah, Philadelphia, thank you. And then the Drosdey Theater in Stellenbosch. They've literally turned their theatres or their studios into TV studios, into, filming studios. So, yes, I'm also going to do some of my one-woman shows.
And how do we support that? How do we as members of the public support that?
You buy tickets online. This will be web tickets, I think.
Web tickets,
yeah, web
okay.
tickets. But there'll be a big campaign about that, and they're all sharing resources. And what's wonderful is that the technicians, the actors, the directors, everybody is doing it for free and just working for the ticket price. So each one is getting its slice. Their slice
of the ticket price.
But that's how desperate it is. I mean, you have
I think it's called the hustle.
It's called the hustle. It's called the hustle.
hustle.
But there, all these technicians too that just don't have jobs. They've got equipment, they've got everything. They don't have jobs. Even if you've got a permit to drive around, there's no work.
There's no work to be done.
Yeah.
Did there any indication when things will get back to the new normal? What the new normal in theatre
tomorrow.
looks like? But I mean, I'm sure there are some ways you could practice social distancing in theatres, and obviously
you can, but it's a big problem is with the audiences. You see, you can have 50 people going to a church service, but not 50 people going to a theatre, and it would be very hard to sustain anything.
That does strike me as a bit odd. I mean, if you can go with 49 other people to a service there. It's
as long as you don't sing and you mustn't cry at a funeral.
You'll have to stop all your tear jerking.
I saw the Opera House in Vienna is reopening, and they've removed all the seats and installed
every second seat.
so
isn't
the
it? Or
seating's
something like that. Yes, they changed the seating, or every second row.
So that's
but it's possible, But it's going to take a while. But we don't know because we don't know what's going to happen next. There's very little communication. We really just don't know.
How you shoot a movie,
How are you going to do that
Yeah.
final slow motion?
Well, it's going to take away a bit of the romance with the mask, something there, sort of, you'll have to have a mask.
Yeah.
It'll probably trigger a whole new genre of movies.
Rather muffled speaking.
Yes.
I wonder what's going to happen with the incredible technology out there to create. I mean, Carrie Fisher, who passed away before the final filming of Star Wars, and they completely just put her in the movie, created her from nothing.
Yes.
So voice artistry might become...
I was about to say to you, Armand, the last time I was in the Vienna Opera House, I couldn't afford a seat. I stood up on the stool. But it was magnificent.
It was fantastic,
It was really beautiful. And the acoustics there are amazing. And, just talking about the Vienna, I mean, theatre has survived wars, it's survived plagues, it's always come back. And so are you confident it will survive?
Yes, I'm absolutely confident it will survive. I think it's going to take a hell of a knock, and theatres are going to close down. They just can't afford it. So the sooner we can move on, the better. The sooner we know, if you could just plan a bit, then you can start working, you can start rehearsing. I think one should start rehearsals pretty soon for productions so that when the ban is lifted, when we can actually go straight into production and not still have to hang around and rehearse for weeks or whatever.
So Anroux as well, I'm sure there's going to be a big hunger for, that's the other opportunity. I mean, I know I think the last thing I watched was at the Fugard, and I mean, it's like, for some people, it's good for the soul, and we crave this human interaction. We crave the challenge that's given to us by theatre. We crave all of these things. Do you think there's going to be a sudden boost?
I don't know what happened now. So.
Okay, well, I'll chuck the question to Armand and to Armand. Do you think there's going to be a craving now?
Absolutely, I'm craving.
Out of this lockdown.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've been listening in Sea Point to the impromptu performances that have been put on
8 p.m. Every night.
Yes.
There is a new sound. I'm struggling to identify it, but there's the vuvuzela. Vuvuzelas, but there's a new sound that I'm having to identify. And I think, like you said, that's the opportunity. So, and as Sandra said, let's start rehearsing, whether it's over Zoom or whatever, so that when this lifts, the arts can get the injection it really needs.
Do we know what other countries are doing with their artists? I mean, do we know what they're doing in other developing countries?
It's hard to say. It's all different. I know in New York they did a survey, and 49% of the audience, and this is 2 months back, said that as soon as the theatres open, they're going to be there. So that's pretty heartening to hear that, you know. But of course, they have the sort of volumes of audiences that we don't have. So we need 100% commitment.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, the big thing here is that we've got a duty as citizens, and, you know, if government's not stepping in, we've got a duty as citizens to keep the arts alive. It's such an integral part of our social fabric, of who we are. And as I said, you know, I really liked what you said about holding a mirror up to us.
Yeah, and it is that,
you know, being able to hold a mirror up to society and to challenge society, you know, about current thoughts, trends that are mainstream. The theatre's always been at the forefront of holding that mirror up to society and challenging people.
Yeah.
What has been your most challenging role where you've really felt this is I'm making a stand? Was it the famous kiss, or was it the...
No, I mean, that was challenging, but more challenging in a way socially, you know, because it was quite hectic what was going on. But I always think that what you are doing now, I think that my one-woman show that's been cut off at the knees at the moment, Kampur, which is based on it's a Boer War story of a woman who was sexually very badly abused during the war. And I think that's an important story to tell. It's a very harrowing story, but it's a very important story to be telling now in this time that we're living, because we're staring this in the face all the time. And it's, for me, so interesting because when I work on that play, I keep thinking nothing has changed. You know, it's more than 100 years ago. But what has changed? Nothing has really changed. Perceptions haven't really changed. Women have more rights. That's all you can say. But they're not better treated.
Absolutely.
And the perceptions haven't really changed that much around it. And male behaviour hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And you know, this is another critical role for theatre, is to bring these things to the fore in a way in which I think that you get far more buy-in and understanding, and you can shift people's attitudes.
Yes,
without necessarily bearing down on them with a with a finger.
Because how do you change attitude? You can only change attitude by changing heart, by changing minds. You cannot change it any other way. You can't tell people what to do. They're just not interested. They don't listen. I mean, I was involved in a case where the lady who works for me, the daughter was raped. And I went to the owner of the business, and he said to me, "Madam, I'm not going to do anything about this because it's got nothing to do with me." I was completely gobsmacked, you know. And I thought, well, perhaps if he came to see a play like Kampur, maybe something in him would shift, you know, because it's extraordinary that someone could even think of saying that.
Now, Armand, you become a bit of a celeb around the keto diet and that sort of thing. How have you been managing the keto under lockdown? Because that's the one thing I've not got right under lockdown is eating and too little exercise. So one tip, one good piece of advice about how to drop the weight quickly post-lockdown blues.
This is purely my personal opinion. I'm not giving any dietary advice. I've learned to do the disclaimer.
Don't worry, you won't be Tim Noakes. It's fine.
Keep it simple, and I'm not here to say don't eat carbs and don't eat bread, but
don't eat bread.
But don't eat bread and don't eat carbs.
That's something I've struggled with. You know, I was so disciplined and so good on cutting back on wine and bread. But being at home, all I wanted to do is cook and eat delicious stuff.
You know, I've wrote this cookbook, and I really believe in the philosophy and the health and the nutrition, and I follow that most of the time. And then it's like, I can't drink, I can't walk outside, I can't. I'm not going to put another I can't on myself. So I've been smashing all the wrong things as well. We've been making homemade pasta and making lasagnas, and I baked bread rolls for boerewors. I baked bread rolls. So I've let it go. You know, we're being so constricted from all sides.
Yeah, you can't punish yourself any further.
One of the things that I've really missed during this time is being able to go away, and I'm craving some wide open spaces and that. So I'm going to move to our next guest, is Manny De Freitas, and Manny is the DA Shadow Minister of Tourism. And Manny, do you want to take us through what impact this has had on the tourism industry and what our suggestions and inputs have been to government about how we can help the tourism industry?
Yes, it's very interesting to listening to what's happening in the entertainment and associated fields, because it's exactly the same what's happening in tourism. And as you know, John, we presented our plan to government, both to the Minister and to the President this week. And let me tell you that what government has got as a plan isn't a plan. They, in fact, have admitted that they don't have a plan for recovering tourism. And the Minister has announced that in December, tourism will restart again. Well, let me tell you that by December, on our statistics and survey we've done that informed our plan, 93% of all tourism related sectors will be decimated. There'll be nothing left, 93%. And so what we did that informed our plan was we did 4 main surveys, and we found some quite shocking things. That by the end of May, in other words, last week, 25% of all people employed in the sector have lost their jobs. And by August, 71% would have lost jobs. So it's what we did is in our plan, it was an informed plan with real data, real information, so that we can, when we present it to government, could give us real facts. So the irony is that the people that the government keeps on saying they're fighting for are the people that are going to be suffering the most, because it's not a racial thing. Corona has affected all of us. And when you impact on one aspect of the sector of tourism, you impact on others as well. So our plan looks at opening up in a phased approach. It says there are many accommodation sectors that are already by their very nature social distancing as it is. So for example, lodges, self-catering accommodation, boutique hotels even, where there are minimal amount of people, minimum amount of staff involved. These institutions, there's no reason for them not to open. They're already socially distanced by their very nature. And those are the kind of suggestions we're making. Even places like theatres could be opened. Yes, you limit it, just like a restaurant. You would limit if the maximum capacity is 100, then you say, well, you're only allowed 50%. And I promise you, people will go and make sure that there is social distancing and things do take place in the right way so that people aren't affected by the coronavirus. That's very, very important. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you want me to go into facts and figures.
Well,
but just
sort of what is the sort of gist and thrust of the submission that we've made?
Well, I mean, we've reached a few conclusions, but before I get to that, the first is that 64. Let me just tell you that the perception is that tourism, first of all, is a small sector. Let me tell you, it employs more people than mining, for example. 1 in every 23 people in South Africa that's employed is employed in tourism. It's a huge sector. It's growing, right? And for example, also the spend. You know, people also think that it's foreigners that are bringing all this tourism money, and they're the big spenders. Well, let me tell you that 56% of all our local spend, all our tourism spend is spent by local tourists. And so, you know, even though the foreigners bring pounds and dollars and everything else, it is our own people that are spending. So domestic tourism is important. And what we're saying, the very first thrust of our proposal is that we have to open up domestic tourism. And in order for that to open, we're asking for borders, provincial borders to be opened. And then automatically you're allowing lodges, hiking places that have distant accommodation with each other, self-catering places, all these places already social distance. We're also saying in instances where there are accommodation hospitality industry that don't have, that aren't social distance, for example, traditional hotels, if they can show that they are social distancing, for example, a 100-bed hotel, and they can prove that they only accommodate 50 and that every second room, for example, won't be used and all that kind of thing, surely they should be allowed to open. Because in doing that, we're not only saving lives, but also making sure those people aren't being lost. And already, according to our stats, 25% of the sector have already lost their jobs. Yeah. And by the end of August, 78% would have lost their jobs as well. Those are frightening figures, because you're talking about way over 1 million people that are employed that will be without employment as of the end of this year. And let me tell you that one of our surveys was in Franschhoek of which 403, so this isn't a small survey, 403 different establishments, not rooms, not beds, establishments. In other words, an establishment being a bed and breakfast, a hotel, whatever it is, a lodge, 403 participated. And they said that 93% of them will not be sustained by the end of the year if things continue. And 85% said they will not be able to pay salaries by the end of August. And they've already, 55% have already started retrenching.
Sure.
These are frightening figures and a microcosm of what is going on throughout the country. And I mean, I spoke to people, and most of these people, similar to the entertainment industry, these people are passionate people. They've built up their little bed and breakfasts. They've built up their lodge accommodation thing as their life's work. They have put in personal savings. They've put their whole lives, their whole family, everything into it. And I was on the phone with a man. I didn't have anything to say to him, who was literally crying of tears because his life's work was being down the drain because of government's irresponsibility. Sorry, I'm just very passionate about this. So I just have to, but I mean, this is where we are.
Manny, I think this is a good time to bring in Kelly, because Kelly is exactly one of those people who poured her life savings into a beautiful, beautiful guest house in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, one of the most beautiful parts, I think, of the country, the Camberg. And Glengarry has been a family-run guest house for many, many years. So, Kelly, do you want to just tell us how lockdowns affected your business?
Disastrous, John. 3 months of zero income, and yet all the expenses keep going out. Every operational cost, utility bill, wages continue to go. The real tragedy for tourism is that March, April, and May, as Manny will know, is South Africa's prime time. It's Easter, it's school holidays, it's the long weekends, it's the beautiful time of year when all the functions and events and weddings happen. So, look, we've done our very best to honor bookings and transfer them to a future date. However, what that means for us is that this period has expired without a single transaction. So very, 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 very tough.
Yeah. So, Kelly, I mean, you're a young couple. You and Gareth have put essentially your life savings into Glengarry and to taking it to the next level. And you've added a whole lot of other new additions to Glengarry. But let's just talk a little bit about the faces behind Glengarry, because I think a lot of people see the owners, they see the venue, they don't know the story about the people that are reliant on Glengarry for income. And let's talk a little about the community there in Mpofana who all earn a living from Glengarry.
Yeah.
And from the other guest houses in the area, I'm sure.
For sure. So, we've personally made a choice to keep all of our staff employed through that South Africa Future Trust loan, which we've taken in our personal capacity. To date, we've received one UIF payment in April. We're obviously hoping for more. We've applied to the Tourism Relief Fund, but not heard anything back there yet. So, the reality is that we can go for about 3 months on our reserves. But the biggest problem is if we stay closed, our inability to recover becomes impossible, and such a large number of jobs will be lost. And, particularly Berg and Bush, these kind of places, we create jobs for very rural people who don't have any form of formal training. And these guys support entire communities.
Yeah. So a lot of the people at Glengarry, I mean, second, third generation families have been working at Glengarry and facing hardship now. Yeah. Kelly, let's talk a little about...
Facing hardship.
Sorry? Do we carry on?
Facing very, very, very real hardship, and like we say, there's only as Manny also mentioned, going on for too much longer it's an absolute impossibility.
So let's talk about what contingency measures a place like Glengarry could do to operate in a social distancing way or a responsible way during COVID. And I know you've made a submission to government and to the presidency on this. Do you want to take us through how a guest house like yours could actually function in this particular environment?
John, this place is designed for this kind of situation. So we are out of town, we are spacious, we're in the mountains, we're all about hiking, walking, riding bicycles. There's self-catering cottages, you're not sitting in a dining room. I think this is the kind of healing environment people absolutely need right now. You know, this is part of the solution to the virus, not the problem.
Yeah. So you think that, I mean, you'd be able to have guests and so check-in, would you be able to manage check-ins remotely and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No one would even need to see another human being if they didn't need to. So as you say, we've put a proposal forward, which you guys have taken. Thank you. We're so grateful for that. Easily, you know, I think the sanitization and the protocols that we'll use in future will be the new standard anyway. And then people can choose if they'd like to check in online or go straight to their cottage, if they'd like to order a takeaway. Those are really simple things to implement.
Well, great, Kelly, and we wish you guys well at Glengarry, and I certainly can't wait to get back up there as soon as I can, that beautiful mountain air and the beautiful environment and those wonderful running trails. I can't wait to head back up there as soon as I can. So thanks very much, Cal. Manny, let's go back to you and just talk about, do we have an idea about the number of jobs that tourism employs in the country?
I wanted to talk about what a lot of people don't realize is that the tourism sector is very varied. And that was one of the problems that the minister has done, is that she's painted the entire sector with the same brush. So, for example, people don't realize that the events and conferencing sector of the tourism sector is a vital, important part of our sector in South Africa, and it's growing. We're one of the world's big attractions for events and conferencing, world expos, things like that. And we're growing more and more in interest, particularly in the Western Cape and particularly in Cape Town because of its natural beauty. And what we did, one of the surveys we did was particularly in the events and conferencing facilities area, and over 30 different, this is just a microcosm, so it's only over 30 companies partook in this survey, and they told me that between February and November, the total amount of cancellations, rebookings and so forth, mostly cancellations, amounted to 255 million rand. That's just in 9 months that they would have lost, that they have lost. And so that's just one small microcosm. But the real tragedy is because they're not recognized by government as a real sector, just like, by the way, tourist guides or tourist drivers are. They're not recognized. They don't qualify for any funding and can't apply for it. So that's just one little microcosm. Another survey we did was an area called Route 24, which is an area that stretches over 120 kilometers from Gauteng to the northwest, leading up to the Hartbeespoort area and so forth. And that includes 24 different lodges, ideal for social distancing. All of them are lodges, all of them out in the bush, hiking trails, outdoor sports, all this kind of thing where there is lots of space. They project that they will lose, I've got my figures here, over 10,000 jobs, and that includes families that these people that are employed at these lodges will be sustaining. I mean, these are big numbers. So Route 24, for example, is ready. Quite what Kelly said about the cleansing and the sanitizing and all that kind of thing. Let me tell you, these lodges were doing it already as far back as in February, because they were predicting and seeing ahead of what may take place. Another interesting one, the numbers are very scary. One of the surveys we did was what we call the Western Cape survey, and that was 3 spots, big area, tourist attractions, and that was Knysna, Stellenbosch, and Cape Town. And by the end of the year, as things continue this way, over 110,000 jobs will be lost at this. I mean, these things are just, it's like a war. That's these dead bodies that are just coming day after day after day. And so this is why it's so important that when I wrote to the minister, I said, I'm happy for you to take the credit for it. I don't want to be political about it. This is about real life. This is about real jobs. And here she is in her ivory tower saying, well, let them wait. We'll only start in December. This is crazy. People and the sector, and I'm sure I can count for many other sectors, say the same thing for many other sectors, are prepared to adapt, are prepared to accommodate what needs to be done. We all understand how serious and dangerous this virus is, and we'll adapt accordingly. But the government won't do it, and that's the scary part.
I think, Manny, for me the scariest part has been that where there is money, it's just unable to get it into the system. So you've heard there from Kelly, for instance, one UIF payment out of all of their staff. And you're hearing that over and over again. We've heard from Sandra and Armand that, very few people are getting, the money's not getting in to the areas where it's needed to be able to stimulate and keep those areas alive. That's got to be a big problem.
And what makes it worse, I can't talk about other reliefs, but I know the Tourism Relief Fund very well. And I've got a list of people that comply absolutely. They comply in every single criteria and have been rejected. Now, obviously, I've written to the minister and I'm asking questions about that. But how is that possible? How is it possible that you comply in every single category that they have given, and yet these people don't qualify for funding? There's something very fishy. So it's not even about just the availability of funding. It's people that qualify are being turned away. And that is unfair and it's dangerous. And these very people that do qualify are having to close down, having to fire people or retrench them rather, and so forth. So it really is a great, great concern. And I'm fearing that we were a great tourist attraction worldwide. We were the biggest growing African tourist attraction for the rest of the world. We were competing with first world countries as far as tourism is concerned. And I'm saying, what's going to happen if we continue like this? We're going to be left with nothing. I can tell you that the UK media, for example, only yesterday announced that South Africa, and in fact, the German media said the same thing, that South Africa is closed. Their borders are closed. Don't even bother to book. This is not the kind of publicity and news that we need in South Africa. It's the very opposite.
So I think, Manny, the principle is, like we say with so many other industries, if you can open safely, you can practice PPE, you can ensure that you're able to do screening, etc. Let's open up to try and save as many jobs as possible. And I think that's the rule of thumb that we're all looking for. So, and I think that goes for the entertainment industry as well. I mean, if you can practice social distancing, if you can close it down, open it up without compromising people's safety, let's do it. And because the catastrophic.
Can there be a plan, please?
Yes,
that would be nice.
You say you want a revolution, we'll want to see the plan.
Yeah, it's interesting that some industries are allowed to adapt and others are not given the opportunity to adapt.
Yes. Yeah.
So you may.
You may not.
But you may not.
It's like saying certain parks are open, others are not. Beaches are not open. You cannot surf or paddle. Why? It's a complete social distancing.
I've never seen two surfers on the same surfboard.
No.
It's naturally practicing social.
Yes.
But I think that's the thing. I think that we all accept there is a pandemic.
Absolutely.
There is a virus. It's going to be with us for 18 to 24 months. We've got to manage as best as we can around it, and we've got to adapt. And, the new normal must be allowed to happen. And I agree with you at 100%, which is why in our submission to government, we said any industry that can sit together and come up with protocols that would make sure that they can do so safely should be allowed to open.
Yes.
You can't pick winners and losers in an economy, because saying your job's more important than this person's job. Every job is important in South Africa.
The same thing happened with a lot of productions were told, no, you can't get any money, because saying things like, this gig is, for instance, has not been cancelled, it's been postponed. No, it's been cancelled. It might happen next year, but that does not mean it's going to happen. It does not mean it's a postponement. I'm sorry, I don't buy that, I don't think that's right at all.
So any final messages from the entertainment industry?
Yes. No, I agree with a doctor that said the other day that the only true pandemic in Africa is starvation. And we cannot go down that road. We cannot do that to the entertainment industry. I mean, how can you do that to such a lot of people? There's got to be a plan. There's got to be help. There's got to be an opening up. We have to start looking at how can we operate? How can we earn a living? We're all dying to get out there to work.
Sure. And we're all dying to see your work. That's the reality. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Manny and Kelly, and to Anroux, and of course to my two studio guests. I say I'm completely starstruck, and
nonsense.
This is sort of the peak, a Coronacast peak here. But thank you very much for making time to come and speak out for the industry. And strength to all of you guys. Yes. And we'll certainly be doing what we can. We govern to assist the arts, because it is such an important thing for a society.
Thank you.
So thank you very, very much.
It's
to both
much
of you
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there you go, folks. That's this Friday's show, and I'm sure you found it as interesting and exciting as I did with all our celebrities on the show, but also a very sober look at what coronavirus is doing to South Africa, but more so the response by government in terms of shutting down so many key industries. And, we've got to protect lives, but we also have to protect livelihoods. And there's an intrinsic link between the work of economically active South Africans and a government's ability to be able to help those who can't help themselves. We need to keep our economy moving. We can't afford an economic collapse. Well, some good news this week. You would have noticed there was a High Court judgment handed down in the North Gauteng High Court, which ruled that many of the lockdown regulations were irrational, unreasonable, and had no place in an open and democratic South Africa. We're excited about it. It wasn't our case, but certainly we believe bolsters the cases that we have before a variety of high courts. And we think these are going to be the first of a series of losses that government starts to feel as it starts to, as people start to rise up against these irrational, unreasonable regulations that are causing such asphyxiation in our economy and in our lives. And we'll keep you up to date with that, as well as our constitutional court challenge. And you may know that we've been given an opportunity to make the case for the case to be heard in the Concourt. We filed papers on the 9th of June, and I look forward to keeping you up to date with those. But really, government's indicated they're going to appeal that North Gauteng High Court case. But here's the thing. Maybe this is a time for government to take a step back and reflect a little bit deeper about the irrationality and unreasonableness. This virus is going to be with us for 18 to 24 months. Surely the time has come for us to sit down and think rationally about how we're going to manage it over this period in a way that does not aggravate, irritate, or make the situation worse than it already is. That's got to be an approach of a responsible government, bearing in mind that a response to a pandemic is always a partnership between the citizens of the country and its government. And when you treat citizens as adults, you provide them with all the information, and you let them make their responsible choices, it's a much stronger response to the virus than this authoritarian, petty, top-down approach that has caused such resentment and anger and has resulted in the tragedy of 11 Black South African men in this country losing their lives to brutality from the SAPS and the SANDF. That's not the kind of society we want to live in. We are all free citizens in a constitutional democracy, and we respect the right of government to govern, but it must govern according to the will of the people of South Africa. And unfortunately, the last 10 weeks of lockdown, amongst the hardest in the world and longest in the world, have exhibited what I believe is a very unfortunate show of authoritarianism and a mentality that says, we know what's best for you, you listen to us. That's not how democratic systems operate, and it's not what we should accept as citizens in an open, accountable democracy. So we're going to keep up the fight on the front lines against the irrationality and unreasonableness as we still seek out ways to deal with the coronavirus in as responsible, safe way as possible. My shout out this week goes to all of those artists out there who have entertained us over the years, have brought us laughter, brought us tears, and held that mirror and reflection up to us as a society. We know things are tough for you at this time, and to all those members of the public out there, if you get an opportunity to go onto a ticketing website and support the arts during this time, please do so. If you're able to make a donation, please make sure that you get in touch with the relevant arts associations, and let's keep our theatre alive. It is such an integral part of our society. That's it for this week. I'll see you all next week on Tuesday, 2 o'clock, for the next version of Coronacast. Until then, stay safe, South Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got to get a picture. Can I be a problem?
I know, I'm just like, when can I ask? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think this is a really important conversation and a platform. Thank you, Sandra.
Anroux.